Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library. My crew is stronger than the plot armor part 5 chapter 81, Saint Nashiro vs Pluton. 2-in-1, what on earth is going on? On the warship, Saint Nashiro's tone was clearly displeased as he looked at Rob Lucci beside him with confusion and asked. At this moment, Rob Lucci, standing on the warship, also wanted to ask the same question. What on earth is going on? Why is this pier so deserted? Where are the people? Where are the people from the Otherworld pirate crew? Where are the people from the Alabasta Kingdom? A Gorosei of such high stature, arriving on such a massive warship, bringing news that covered the sky, yet not a single person came to greet him? Is this appropriate? Recalling the intelligence he had gathered earlier in the Alabasta Kingdom, there were no welcome ceremonies, not even any arrangements. Initially, Rob Lucci had thought that the Otherworld pirate crew was preparing a special surprise for the Gorosei, which was why they couldn't find any information. As it turns out, it would be a miracle if he could have found anything. The situation now is very clear: neither the Alabasta Kingdom nor the Otherworld pirate crew has made any preparations for a welcome. Such behavior is undoubtedly a direct slap in the face to the world government. But why would the Otherworld pirate crew do this? The news this time was overwhelming, and the headlines were all about the world government wanting to show goodwill toward the Otherworld pirate crew. Logically speaking, the Otherworld pirate crew should have seized this opportunity and tried every possible way to facilitate this meeting. Rob Lucci hadn't even tried to stop these headlines; in fact, he had deliberately spread them. The purpose was to let the whole world know that within the Otherworld pirate crew, there wasn't just the voice of Captain Laluan, but that all the officers were formidable. But regardless, in this matter, such a problem should never have occurred during the greeting phase. To increase his prestige as captain, Laluan should have personally come to meet the Gorosei, and he should have been fighting for the chance to do so. Directly handling the interface would have solidified and showcased his status. It would also have demonstrated equal standing with the world government. The other officers, in order to compete for their respective positions, should also have been fighting to come and welcome them. At the very least, how could a member country like the Alabasta Kingdom dare not send anyone to greet them? Now, looking at this empty harbor and Saint Nashiro, who was standing on the ship, waiting in full posture, such a bizarre scene was simply too exaggerated. The people who were supposed to be anxious were not, and the person who should have had the feeling of a grand arrival had become a complete clown. As soon as the word clown appeared in his mind, Rob Lucci felt cold sweat running down his back. This time, how angry would Saint Nashiro be? At this moment, just as Rob Lucci wanted to sneak a glance to the side, Saint Nashiro's voice came over. What is the meaning of this Otherworld pirate crew? Do they look down on me, Saint Nashiro? Or do they look down on our world government? When Saint Nashiro said this, his tone already carried obvious anger. For so many years, this was the first time someone had treated his arrival as nothing. There wasn't even a greeting ceremony? The empty harbor before him, contrasted with the entire ship of elites from the world government, plus the personal arrival of a Gorosei, created an extremely sharp contrast. It was as if he, Saint Nashiro, had rushed over, and they didn't even want to bother with him. Thinking of this, Saint Nashiro's expression could not help but become even uglier. At this time, there were many ships parked around the harbor, and without exception, these ships all belonged to people from other factions. After all, because of the Gorosei's personal visit, there were many people paying attention, and naturally, many people from other factions wanted to witness this scene with their own eyes. Saint Nashiro actually knew about this on his way here. Many ships from various factions were following his warship, but he did not order them to be stopped. After all, the more people who knew about this matter, the better; the wider it could be publicized, the better. The world government had intended to promote this meeting anyway. If people from so many factions could come and release the news about the meeting immediately, that would naturally be even better. But what he hadn't expected was that these people had now become onlookers watching him make a fool of himself. Saint Nashiro's high-level observation haki had already allowed him to hear the discussions from the surrounding ships, and he even heard quite a bit of mockery. This Otherworld pirate crew is really something, daring to treat the Gorosei like this. The Gorosei, I guess in the eyes of the Otherworld pirate crew, they don't look like much, ha ha. This otherworld pirate crew is definitely the craziest pirate crew in history. I like it. I have a premonition that some kind of incredible battle is about to happen. Saint Nashiro heard all the discussions from the surrounding ships. Rob Lucci was actually very angry as well. As someone who grew up in Mary Geos, Rob Lucci was born with the mission of protecting the celestial dragons and maintaining the dignity of the world government. Hearing so much discussion from the surrounding ships, Rob Lucci immediately gave a look to several CP0 officers beside him. After receiving Rob Lucci's look, the officers immediately dispersed, and small warships went out to look for people in the surroundings. Meanwhile, Saint Nashiro walked off the warship with an extremely low air pressure and entered the harbor, beginning to walk along the official road toward the royal palace. Although no one came to greet him, this time, he had to go to the royal palace of the Alabasta Kingdom no matter what. Because there, he would find the otherworld pirate crew, and also the kingdom's king, Cobra. He absolutely had to settle the score with these two groups of people regarding this matter. Now, Saint Nashiro was no longer thinking about how to sow discord during the negotiations later. The previous plans and such were no longer important. He was now completely filled with anger. Before, the reason he gave the otherworld pirate crew such an opportunity, and the reason he agreed to the Marines' plan, actually had a hint of amusement in it. After all, as the highest official at the center of power, there hadn't been any particularly fresh news on this sea for such a long time. This otherworld pirate crew was completely a fun toy worth playing with. But now, since this toy had treated him as a toy, then the previous plans and such naturally didn't matter anymore. In Saint Nashiro's view, the Alabasta Kingdom had no reason to exist anymore, along with the otherworld pirate crew. Although it was said that this pirate crew had a few strong people, so what? For the world government and the Marine, destroying any faction was a fairly simple matter. Even the current four emperors' pirate crews were entities that could be wiped out with a single thought from the Gorosei. Did a mere pirate crew that had just started out really think they were something? Saint Nashiro walked angrily toward the royal palace. At this time, spies from various factions, as well as people who wanted to watch, also followed Saint Nashiro's pace and walked forward. However, they didn't walk very far before the ordinary citizens of the Alabasta Kingdom all retreated into their own houses. They understood this feeling of a storm brewing all too well. The Alabasta Kingdom had experienced such things before. In the first few days, when the citizens learned that the Gorosei were coming, they were actually thinking about whether they should go to greet them and what would be discussed in this meeting. However, because the king had issued an order, the citizens did not organize any activities like a welcome ceremony, but the vast majority of citizens were still paying attention to this event. However, all this attention stopped at the harbor, where there was no welcome ceremony, because everything seemed to be heading in a bad direction. Spies from other factions, having followed Saint Nashiro to a distance not far from the front of the royal palace, also chose to watch from afar. After all, the air pressure around this Gorosei was truly too terrifying. It was obvious there would be a big battle later. The development of events had exceeded everyone's expectations, and these people did not want to get caught in the crossfire. However, a few news coups were following closely, and one or two of them were even shaking slightly. Their trembling was not just because of the fear of facing Saint Nashiro, but more because of the excitement for the huge news that was about to come. As subordinates of Morgan's, these news coups were naturally full of interest in this huge news that might happen soon. They were all pushing forward, especially a few little birds that had already flown to the royal palace and taken quite a few photos. At this moment in the royal palace, whether it was Luluan's crew or Cobra, they still had no preparations for receiving Saint Nashiro and were still busy with their own affairs. Only inside, Pluton, seemingly sensing something, revealed a smile of interest at the corner of his mouth. Then, with a flash, he disappeared from where he was and arrived directly above the royal palace. Saint Nashiro, that person is Pluton. Pluton's sudden appearance on top of the royal palace naturally attracted everyone's attention at once. The news coups kept taking pictures, but this time, they all retreated together. Saint Nashiro also looked up at Pluton above. Looking at Pluton, who was clad in pitch-black armor with an aura as deep as an abyss and as heavy as a prison, Saint Nashiro himself felt a bit dazed. As a Gorosei, he considered himself to have seen the world's top auras. After all, in front of Imo-sama, all conquerors' haki were like childish games. But the person in front of him had an aura that seemed just like Imo-sama. Even though he didn't deliberately release his conqueror's haki, it still gave him a feeling of suffocation. Especially the noble aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time, which was not even comparable to conqueror's haki. "You are Pluton?" Saint Nashiro looked at Pluton above and asked coldly. Since he had decided to take action against the otherworld pirate crew, he naturally wouldn't give this Pluton a pleasant look. Although the other party's aura was very strong, whether the person himself was strong or not would only be known after fighting. Hearing that extremely flat hum from Pluton, which sounded like a light hum towards some ant, Saint Nashiro felt his anger rush straight to his head. "Haha, interesting. This is the first time someone has dared to be so arrogant in front of me. Boy, take my sword." Pluton's contempt, Saint Nashiro could feel it clearly. From birth until now, Saint Nashiro was almost the first to see someone who dared to despise him so much. So, without hesitation, he drew the first-generation Kitetsu from his waist and slashed a powerful, incomparable sword energy toward Pluton on the roof. This sword was swung, carrying black and red lightning, with the aura all condensed at the tip of the blade. With a super-strong haki infusion slash, everything around seemed to become silent. Even the originally calm sky rolled with streaks of dark clouds. The strength of this sword, I'm afraid, could only be received by someone at the 4 Emperors level in the New World. Even an Emperor's first mate like Marco, facing this sword, would probably die on the spot. But for such a terrifying blow, Pluton didn't even lift an eyelid. Just when this slash was about to reach him, he lifted his eyes indifferently and gave a look. Just one look, and this slash completely dissipated into the air, leaving not a trace. It was as if Saint Nashiro had never swung that sword. Watching this slash disappear into the air like that, Saint Nashiro was stunned. He stood there blankly, his eyes changing from controlling everything to disbelief. It seemed as if he couldn't understand at all how his sword had disappeared into thin air. Looking at Pluton on the roof, Saint Nashiro felt that it was somewhat unrealistic. The means of this man in front of him seemed to be somewhat beyond his imagination, completely not any system, it was just like nothingness. The feeling of this man was really too strange. A drop of cold sweat could not help but appear on Saint Nashiro's forehead. An unprecedented sense of crisis swept over Saint Nashiro's heart. This was the first time he had such a feeling. Seemingly to hide the unease in his heart, Saint Nashiro slashed a few more sword energies at Pluton on the roof. One colder than the other, one faster than the other. Each attack was an admiral-level attack. But these slashes still disappeared without a trace just as they were about to reach Pluton. At this moment, Pluton didn't even lift his eyelid again. Instead, after these slashes ended, he looked at Saint Nashiro on the ground and said faintly, "Are you done?" "Then it's my turn." Smile.jpg, Chapter 82, The Death of Saint Nashiro. 2-in-1, Untitled Chapter. Am I finished? After hearing Pluton's words, such a thought couldn't help but surface in Saint Nashiro's mind. This simple sentence from Pluton made Saint Nashiro feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. It was a despair that swept through everything in an instant. Even though Pluton hadn't made a move yet and had only spoken so simply to him. Yet Saint Nashiro felt an unprecedented sense of impending death, involuntarily erupting from the depths of his heart and mind. Within Saint Nashiro's constricted pupils, Pluton's figure, clad in black armor, took a step forward. Then, in the next instant, Pluton's figure appeared directly in front of the palace gates. No one could see through the trajectory of Pluton's movement. Even Sara was far inferior to such speed. The surrounding CP0 officers also immediately gathered in front of Saint Nashiro. Rob Lucci and the others directly transformed into their devil fruit animal forms. This was their strongest method. The initial slashes alone had already made them clearly realize the bounty on the Pluton before them was definitely not fake. Even a bounty of over 3 billion was likely a bit low. His strength was incredibly exaggerated. Facing an expert of this level, Rob Lucci knew clearly that as cannon fodder, they naturally didn't dare to hold anything back. From the very start, they directly assumed their strongest fighting stances. Looking at the crowded soldiers before him, Saint Nashiro still felt no sense of security. It was just like before, with only fear surging from the bottom of his heart. His top-tier observation haki told him that he was likely not far from death. As one of the Gorosei, Saint Nashiro truly hadn't imagined that he could feel such an aura and sense of dread from anyone other than Ima-sama. This man's strength had completely exceeded his imagination. Originally, Saint Nashiro thought that even if a conflict broke out, with his own strength, he could easily suppress the entire Otherworld pirate crew. Although Garp and Kizaru had been defeated, he believed he should have no problem suppressing the opponent. But seeing him now, Saint Nashiro realized just how ridiculously wrong he had been. This Otherworld pirate crew was definitely much stronger than the four Emperor's pirate crews, and the threat to the world government was also extremely significant. Not just himself, but the judgment of the entire Gorosei had suffered massive errors and issues. Although the D-clan was not present, the strength of this Otherworld pirate crew was undeniable. Even the D-clan likely wasn't as threatening as the man before him. Saint Nashiro subconsciously reached out to touch the Den Mushi in his robes, thinking of transmitting today's news immediately. The misjudgment of the Otherworld pirate crew had to be corrected at once. Otherwise, the world government might suffer incredibly exaggerated losses. However, before Saint Nashiro's hand could make even the slightest move, he saw Pluton before him take another step forward. With this step, his figure did not disappear. Instead, a pressure dense to the extreme bore down toward his side. The celestial phenomena originally altered by his own haki infusion slashes were now instantly and completely overwhelmed by a new vision. The rolling, churning dark clouds seemed to reverse direction in an instant. Black and red lightning flashed incessantly within the cloud layers. It seemed as though even the sky was emitting low, mournful cries. And the churning dark clouds seemed to faintly form the shape of a massive wolf's head. These dark clouds obscured the entire sky, and the range they affected was countless times larger than Saint Nashiro's previous conqueror's haki. Meanwhile, Rob Lucci and the rest of the CP unit felt as if their bodies, and even their souls, were being crushed to death by this aura. Their entire beings were unable to make the slightest movement, completely unable to withstand this aura. They were forced to remain where they stood. This conqueror's haki was the purest form of pressure from a superior to an inferior. Rob Lucci felt as if the figure slowly approaching him was a high and mighty god residing in the high heavens, while he himself was merely a grain of sand, commonly seen everywhere in the Alabasta kingdom. The two sides did not seem to be life forms of the same dimension. What exactly is going on? Amidst this extreme pressure, Rob Lucci watched helplessly as his arms, originally possessing leopard characteristics and the power of his Zoan devil fruit form, were receding step by step. It was as if they were being forcibly driven back by this overwhelming pressure. As Pluton stepped past, his leopard form completely vanished, returning to his original human form. Furthermore, Rob Lucci felt the devil fruit power within him quietly changing, as if being forcibly compressed back into his body by the pressure sweeping around him. Or perhaps the power within him was being inexplicably annihilated bit by bit. Not just Rob Lucci, but many devil fruit users who had transformed into animal forms and were blocking the way for Saint Nashiro had now reverted to their human forms. And every single one of them had a body that was trembling slightly. It was as if something was about to be stripped from their bodies. Ah! Following a shrill scream, Rob Lucci's pupils shifted slightly, catching sight of an officer in the CP0 unit being annihilated just like that. His entire body began to turn into ashes at a slow but steady pace, as if being melted away, leaving no trace behind. Only a Zoan devil fruit remained, floating in midair at the spot where he had stood. Seeing this, Rob Lucci's pupils constricted to the extreme. Feeling the changes within his own body, he seemed to realize something. Step, step, step. As Pluton's footsteps became clearer and clearer, Rob Lucci also felt that his own body was about to undergo some kind of change. At a certain moment, the pressure originally weighing down on him seemed to vanish instantly, replaced by an extreme pain that surged forth. However, Rob Lucci did not scream like that officer. His pupils were merely filled with extreme disbelief, his eyes fixed on Pluton until his own body also turned to ash and disappeared from the spot, leaving only a yellow fruit covered in leopard spots, shaped like a cat's head. It floated in mid-air. It just hung there quietly. Saint Nashiro's entire body also began to tremble slightly. Because before him everyone from the world government he had brought along had already turned to ash in that eerie manner, vanishing bit by bit. Yet he couldn't even recognize what kind of method this was, much less have any ability to resist. Most importantly, that figure, appearing as if walking out of hell, was approaching him step by step. Perhaps we can talk. I am a top official of the world government, one of the Gorosei. The benefits I can bring to the otherworld pirate crew are many, and I possess sufficiently high value. I think we. Seeing Pluton walk up to him step by step, Saint Nashiro began to speak, continuously detailing the value of his status as one of the Gorosei, as well as his own position among the celestial dragons and within the world government. He seemed to be attempting to use his status and value to trade for a glimmer of hope for survival. Unfortunately, Pluton's eyes remained as indifferent as ever. He seemed completely indifferent to what Saint Nashiro was saying. Meeting Pluton's cold and silent eyes, Saint Nashiro's words gradually trailed off, and in the end, he even lowered his head as if accepting his fate. You should know that this is just how the world is: either the sheep dies or the wolf dies. Either the weak wolf starves to death, or the weak sheep is bitten to death. Perhaps the world is too cruel, and yet, it is beautiful because of it. I think you should understand all this. Pluton looked at Saint Nashiro before him and spoke in an extremely calm tone. His slightly furrowed brow seemed to show Pluton's dissatisfaction with Saint Nashiro's earlier plea for help. Saint Nashiro with his head lowered, Pluton whose words had just fallen. They just stood there. The surrounding winds seemed afraid to approach. An absolute void formed around the two of them. Meanwhile, various forces gathering. Information in the distance began taking photos frantically. From the moment Pluton appeared, the cameras in their hands had not stopped. Pluton, all by himself, had dealt with all the Gorosei subordinate forces using nothing but pressure, or rather, conqueror's hockey. Such power was truly terrifying. When they were filming just now, they didn't even dare to look directly in Pluton's direction. Now, this highly anticipated meeting had reached its true finale and final chapter. The development of events had now exceeded everyone's imagination and expectations. Similarly, Pluton's formidable combat strength and immense power had completely surpassed the expectations of everyone present. After a silence lasting dozens of seconds, Saint Nashiro slowly spoke. Lord Pluton, is Luluan, the captain of your otherworld pirate crew, as strong as you? Facing Pluton, Saint Nashiro asked the question he was most curious about at this moment. When Saint Nashiro asked this question, there was an inquisitiveness in his eyes, along with a calmness from having realized everything. Pluton merely gave a faint smile. No words were spoken. The surrounding newscrews took photos frantically, seemingly having deduced what kind of question he had asked from Saint Nashiro's lip movements. And the answer to that question was naturally Pluton's nonchalant smile. Looking at Pluton, Saint Nashiro also smiled and said to Pluton, "Do you want to try my strongest strike?" Pluton did not speak. But Saint Nashiro could feel that the mysterious pressure originally suppressing his devil fruit abilities and his various haki had instantly vanished without a trace. Now, he could definitely exert his strongest power. Thus, without any hesitation, Saint Nashiro chose to transform into his strongest state. At this moment, in a loft directly above the royal palace, Luluan was holding a pair of binoculars, also watching the battle between the two. Saint Ethan Baron V. Nashiro, user of the mythical Zoan horse fruit, model, Bakatsu, possessing the ability to transform into a horsebone knight. In his transformed state, clad in horsebone armor and wielding a horsebone lance, he was like a knight from hell. Jupiter represents growth and expansion. Saint Nashiro integrated this growth and expansion into his own abilities. The Bakatsu fruit ability would make him like an invincible knight on the battlefield, invincible. Unfortunately, it was only like that. Having transformed into the Horsebone Knight, Saint Nashiro held the first-generation Kitetsu, an armament haki as dense as black ink instantly enveloped his entire body. A red flash of lightning crossed his eyes, and the moment his conqueror's haki erupted, it condensed onto the blade. Black and red lightning wound tightly around the blade's edge. There was even a faint pinkish hue lingering within it. Stepping back, this sword strike of Saint Nashiro's concentrated almost all of his aura and ability. It was the strongest slash he could deliver. "I am Saint Nashiro. You bastard!" With a roar of desperation, Saint Nashiro swung the most powerful sword strike of his life. The power of this slash definitely reached the limit of the admiral level. Even one of the 4 emperors would likely be heavily injured upon taking this strike. However, the moment this slash was delivered, what entered Saint Nashiro's eyes was still Pluton's unchanged, calm expression. He saw Pluton gently raise his hand. That hand covered in black scales. He simply extended an index finger, placing it in the air, directly facing the direction where the blade was swinging. This slash, which could almost split an island, was abruptly stopped by that single finger. The moment the blade touched the finger, the various types of haki it carried and the aura gathered from his entire body were almost instantly and completely absorbed by that finger. Saint Nashiro's face lost all color, leaving only a deathly pallor of extreme despair. Immediately followed by crack. For the supreme grade sword, the first generation Kitetsu, was shattered by that finger, turning into a floor full of fragments that fell to the ground. And the Horsebone Knight form, seemingly due to the impact of the collision with that finger, had its bone armor all over its body shattered. The Horsebone Knight turned into a bare horse. Then, in the next moment, countless cracks suddenly appeared on this bare horse. At the moment it looked like it was about to explode, Pluton withdrew his finger. This body, about to burst apart, turned to ash like the others before it and vanished from the spot, leaving only a pale white devil fruit floating in the air, shaped like a small horse. And the fragments of the supreme grade sword on the ground floated into the air after a glance from Pluton, instantly condensing into a sword once more. It no longer had the shape of the previous first-generation Kitetsu, instead, it had become somewhat elegant and much more beautiful. Pluton glanced at the crowd filming in the distance. Without any further action, he simply turned around. One after another, the devil fruits, along with the reforged supreme grade sword, hovered behind Pluton as he entered the palace of the Alabasta Kingdom. And this scene was firmly etched into the eyes and cameras of the scouts from various forces and the news crews. Chapter 83, The World is Shocked. 2-in-1, one of the Gorosei is dead. New World. Inside Morgan's office. Looking at the photos spread across the desk and the short messages sent back, Morgan slumped into his chair, the hair all over his body standing on end, his eyes filled with terror. What happened today was simply too exaggerated, completely exceeding his expectations. He had originally thought the meeting between the two sides would at least be peaceful on the surface, with some undercurrents surging in the shadows. After all, the reason Morgans had sent so many news coups this time was due to the arrangements and orders given by the world government. Perhaps the world government itself never imagined that an unexpected situation would occur. But now, a member of the Gorosei has died in the kingdom of Alabasta. Furthermore, because of the world government's request, the number of news coups was greatly increased, and they all reached the most central area, capturing the entire process of this news from every angle and sending it to him. The nature of this matter has completely changed. From the very beginning to the end of the incident, the otherworld pirate crew remained composed and indifferent. The scene of Saint Nashiro, one of the Gorosei, being utterly defenseless against Pluton. Every single one of these pictures made Morgan's scalp tingle. The table before him was covered with massive news that could overturn the entire world, something he had never dared to imagine. This should have been his lifelong pursuit, his ultimate dream. Morgans had always believed that if he could publish news that overturned the global landscape, he would be willing to pay any price. However, when the moment actually arrived, Morgans hesitated. It wasn't hard to guess that if this news were published, the world government would be absolutely furious. Because the blow this news dealt to the world government's image was simply too severe. As someone working in the news industry, Morgans naturally understood this point. The original reason the world government allowed so many news coups to go was actually to flaunt their dominance, wanting to create an atmosphere where, as soon as the world government arrived, whether it was the other world pirate crew or anyone else, they would immediately and respectfully surrender to negotiate terms. The world government had always stood at the very top of the world, manipulating the winds and clouds like a mastermind. But now, the actions of the other world pirate crew, or rather, Pluton's move, had thoroughly slapped the faces of everyone in the world. Not just the world government. I'm afraid even the Marine, the Four Emperors pirate crews, and other powers would never have imagined that this person, Pluton, could be so powerful. He directly killed Saint Nashiro. And the entire battle was a complete crushing defeat. One person killed Saint Nashiro in his mythical Zoan Bakatsu form, along with all the officers of the CP unit. The abilities he displayed surpassed everyone's imagination. He could make people vanish into thin air in an instant, and he could even directly extract the devil fruits from their bodies and take them away. Morgans believed that the amount of news and information he possessed was not inferior to any power in this world. But Pluton's bizarre ability was something he had never seen before. Previously, that man named Rayleigh held the title of Dark King, and Morgans didn't feel it was out of place. But now, Pluton is truly the king of the underworld. Even the ship that is one of the three great ancient weapons does not deserve this name more than the Pluton in these pictures. At this moment, looking at the pictures and messages scattered across the table, a very obvious struggle appeared in Morgan's eyes. On one side was the massive news he had always longed for, capable of overturning the world's perception. On the other side was the terrifying deterrence the world government had always maintained. Morgans knew that once this news was sent out, he wouldn't be far from death. But this kind of news that could overturn the global landscape was something he might only have this one chance in his life to touch. Finally, after an intense struggle, with bloodshot eyes, Morgans issued his orders to all the staff of the news agency. Although everyone would eventually find out about this matter. Especially the spies from various factions, who had likely already reported this to their masters. However, this news, he must be the one to publish it. Nicely done, Pluton. Looking at the long string of devil fruits behind Pluton, Luluan was quite tempted. After all, the value of these devil fruits was quite considerable. In Luluan's eyes, these things represented a massive amount of wealth points. Luluan looked at the devil fruits behind him with a somewhat fervent gaze, and Pluton naturally sensed his captain's desire immediately. He immediately placed the pile of devil fruits following him in front of Luluan. "Captain, you can take these devil fruits if you need them, but I'd like to use them for an experiment before you do, if that's all right." "Of course, go ahead. Just give them to me after you're done with your experiment." Seeing Pluton take the initiative to use these devil fruits, Luluan naturally didn't stop him. After all, he wasn't in a hurry. He already had many companions by his side now, and with no more worries about his life, he naturally wanted to prioritize the wishes of his companions. A powerhouse like Pluton might just create some world-shaking experimental product. Luluan had noticed Pluton's interest in devil fruits from the beginning, and perhaps this time, Pluton really could bring him a huge surprise. According to Pluton, he might be able to create the kind of devil fruit that allows a person to directly possess origin rule power. Because currently, after eating a devil fruit in this world, one at most gains the ability to use the power. Only after awakening can it be called a level of control, but in the end, it is not the acquisition of the rules themselves. If Pluton's experiment succeeded this time, then whether it was Nami, Vivi, or Robin and the others, their strength would skyrocket. They would instantly become powerhouses in the true sense of this world. In that case, his ship would truly be invincible in every sense of the word. Furthermore, this experimental opportunity was actually very rare for Pluton. After all, to collect so many devil fruits of the same type at once, he had to thank the world government for their selfless gift. As for the aftermath of the Gorosei's death, the world government would certainly suffer a massive shock. This was also something Luluan could predict. Originally, in everyone's eyes, the world government was high and mighty, almost a symbol of being invincible and not to be provoked. As the highest authorities of the world government, the Gorosei naturally held immense weight among all factions. For such figures, let alone death, even an injury would make people realize that the world government was not truly invincible. They could be hurt, they could die, and they were worth trying to challenge. Especially for the Revolutionary Army, the death of a member of the Gorosei this time might allow their momentum to become incredibly vast in an instant. However, Luluan wasn't particularly interested in any of that. Just one member of the Gorosei, if he's dead, he's dead. If the Marine and the world government dared to retaliate, then they shouldn't let their funeral supplies go to waste, they could just leave them there, as everyone would be able to use them eventually. Overturning the world's landscape and such. To Luluan, this matter wasn't even as interesting as the street performance Saitama and Bald Chang took him to see today. Luluan could now be said to have experienced what it truly means to be lonely at the top. A casual action or a random move by a subordinate possessed the influence to overturn the entire world. Although he didn't care about the world government, he had to admit. This feeling was actually quite satisfying. At the same time, spies from various factions were currently scrambling to flee the kingdom of Alabasta. Just as these spies had rushed here because of the meeting between the two sides, they were now leaving in a panic because of the death of a member of the Gorosei. This news was simply too big. These spies didn't even dare to imagine how chaotic the world would become once this matter was truly exposed. They definitely couldn't stay in the kingdom of Alabasta any longer. Every spy was doing everything possible to flee Alabasta at their fastest speed, delivering the news to their respective bosses at the first opportunity. Gorararara! This otherworld pirate crew is truly something else. They actually killed one of the Gorosei. This little fellow called Pluton is truly much stronger than I imagined. Whitebeard looked at Marco. He spoke while laughing loudly. However, this time, Whitebeard's tone lacked the previous heroism and open-mindedness. On the contrary, after he finished laughing, the expression on his face became somewhat serious and solemn. Jupiter, Saint Nashiro, one of the Gorosei, was dead, killed by Pluton of the otherworld pirate crew. Whitebeard knew better than anyone what kind of waves this matter would stir up throughout the entire world. He also knew what this matter meant for the world government. Originally, this meeting had drawn attention from all sides, and Whitebeard also thought the news sent back would inevitably be the two sides amicably signing an agreement. The kingdom of Alabasta would officially become the territory of the otherworld pirate crew, standing as equals with the four emperors and becoming the fifth emperor of the sea. But he hadn't expected that even though the script in his imagination was already so bold, the otherworld pirate crew was even more exaggerated than he thought. They directly killed a member of the Gorosei. The consequence of doing so was naturally, "Son, go notify everyone. Have them all return during this time. It just so happens I miss everyone, so let's have a happy gathering." "All right, father. However, Ace hasn't been answering my calls lately. I'm not sure if something has happened to him. His personality has always been quite restless, just try contacting him a few more times." Jupiter is dead. Onigashima. Dark clouds filled the sky as a massive dragon-shaped figure circled within them. Countless lightning bolts struck its body without producing even a single spark. A voice filled with disbelief came from the dragon-shaped creature's mouth. That Pluton actually managed to kill Saint Nashiro. Then his strength is probably not inferior to that guy called Saitama. Where on earth did this otherworld pirate crew come from? Kaido's dragon head had its eyes wide open, and the entire dragon looked completely incredulous. Meanwhile, the cadres below were also looking at each other in shock. They had all heard the contents from the Den Den Mushi just now. This news was simply too shocking and bizarre. Just hearing this news gave everyone a sense of an impending storm. Even Kaido, known as the strongest creature, appeared somewhat restless as his figure moved through the clouds. "Pass down my command, the beast's pirates must not provoke the marine or the world government during this time. I will leave Onigashima in a few days to visit Linlin and see exactly what has happened." The moment Kaido finished speaking, the Azure Dragon left Onigashima at extreme speed. Marine Headquarters. Marineford. At this moment, the entire Marine base was in an uproar. From the lowest-ranking Marine soldiers to Fleet Admiral Sengoku's office in the loft, everyone was in a chaotic frenzy. This news was simply too urgent and too massive. No one could have guessed that this meeting would actually result in the death of one of the Gorosei. This wasn't as simple as the death of a celestial dragon. As one of the highest authorities of the world government, Saint Nashiro's death left everyone in disbelief. After all, this lord, who possessed a mythical Zoan devil fruit and carried the first-generation Katetsu, had combat power that was not inferior to the 3 admirals of the headquarters. Such a being had actually died at the hands of Pluton. Although Kizaru had said before that Pluton's ability was very bizarre. But a bizarre ability didn't necessarily mean superb combat power. Now, calculating based on the combat power Pluton had displayed, it meant the otherworld pirate crew possessed at least 3 members with strength at the admiral level or higher. This also meant that the otherworld pirate crew alone might even be able to rival the entire Marine headquarters. This kind of exaggerated combat power had never existed in history. Even at the peak of the Rock's pirates, they didn't have this level of collective combat power. At this moment, inside Sengoku's office, the 3 admirals, Sengoku, Garp, and others were gathered once again. Every face was clouded with worry. Only Akainu's face showed a hint of excitement, and he even looked like he was eager to give it a try. When Kizaru looked up and saw this, his lips curled into a thought-provoking, helpless, and bitter smile. After all, even in the entire Marine base today, besides Garp, no one truly believed the words he had said. That bald man, he really only used half of his strength, and it might have been half of 10%. Chapter 84, An Overspec Buster Call. 6 Admiral-level combatants deploy. This time, we must take action. Inside the office. As Sengoku's voice trailed off, the tone for this meeting was firmly set. The people in the room did not find this situation particularly surprising. After all, this incident was too big. One of the Gorosei had died. The otherworld pirate crew would only be enemies from now on, and mortal enemies completely opposed to the world government at that. It was now completely impossible for the Marine to stay out of it. The admirals and the group of vice-admirals in the room all had extremely grim expressions. Especially those who had previously clashed with the otherworld pirate crew, the expressions on their faces were unusually grave. These are some photos taken at the scene, along with all the data on Pluton's move and his battle with Saint Nashiro. You can all take a look first and think of ways to deal with this otherworld pirate crew. Sengoku finished speaking. Bulging document folders were placed in front of everyone. Akainu was the first to act, quickly opening his folder. As soon as he opened it, a stack of photos slid right out of the folder. Following them were sheets of paper filled with text. Saint Nashiro / imbued with Conqueror's Haki was directly absorbed by Pluton using some unknown method? What kind of report is this? What does it mean that we don't know Pluton's attack or movement methods? Everyone's bodies turned to ash, and the devil fruit powers were all stripped away? Possesses Conqueror's Haki even stronger than Red Hair, is not a martial artist, but a devil fruit user. Suspected of not knowing armament Haki? Is this a joke? Looking at the descriptions in the documents, the people sitting in the office were now voicing their opinions one after another. Compared to last time, everyone clearly had a deeper understanding of Pluton now. However, while they had gained understanding, there was still no way to solve the problem. Pluton's methods did not match any recorded devil fruit. Neither the Marine nor the world government knew exactly what Pluton's ability was to this day. However, regardless, that Pluton must be a devil fruit user. Although the ability might be a bit strange, as long as it's a devil fruit ability, there is a way to deal with it. Suru's voice was exceptionally clear in the office. From today on, avoiding a direct conflict with the otherworld pirate crew was completely impossible now. Nowadays, both the Marine and the world government must think of every possible way and use every possible means to completely wipe out the otherworld pirate crew. Only in this way could the world government regain its dignity. One of the Gorosei had died. If the otherworld pirate crew could still live so peacefully and continue to run rampant in this world, then the entire world government would lose all face. Although the Gorosei hadn't called him yet, Sengoku knew, however, this great battle was inevitable. And the scale of this battle was far beyond what a buster call could compare to. It was simply a super-enhanced version of a buster call. It would definitely be the most massive buster call in history. This time, in the true sense, they could only win and could not afford to lose. Although the Marine currently had a secret plan underway, the impact of the otherworld pirate crew incident was far too severe. There was no possibility of dragging it out any longer. In comparison, the otherworld pirate crew matter was even more urgent. If Sea Stone can be applied properly, it could definitely pose a fatal threat to that Pluton. Let's start discussing the battle plan against Pluton immediately. However, while Sea Stone can handle Pluton, how do we deal with that person named Saitama, and that mysterious Laluan? Akiji looked at Tsuru and asked, puzzled. The people present also began to voice their opinions one after another. Broru, just as everyone was engaged in a heated discussion, the Den Mushi in Sengoku's arms rang. After answering the call, a familiar voice came from the other side of the Den Mushi, and Sengoku just kept nodding. We in the Marine will cooperate fully. According to intelligence, the otherworld pirate crew is still in the Alabasta Kingdom. I understand. Alright, that's all. After saying this, Sengoku hung up the Den Mushi. After sitting back down, facing everyone's gazes, Sengoku relayed the content of the call. The world government will dispatch the CP unit, the God's Knights, as well as 2 of the elders, St. Peter and Bosley Saint. We in the Marine must send at least 2 admirals, 7 vice-admirals including Garp, and at least 20,000 elite headquarters troops. The target this time is the otherworld pirate crew and the entire Alabasta Kingdom. After Sengoku said this, everyone present gasped. Even though they knew the world government would make a big move, such a lineup was still shockingly impressive. 2 Gorosei, plus the God's Knights and the CP unit. Although it wasn't specified who the leaders of the God's Knights and the CP unit were, this lineup was at least comparable to 3 admiral-level combatants. 2 admirals from the Marine headquarters, plus Vice Admiral Garp, also made at least 3 admiral-level combatants. Just on paper, there were already 6 admiral-level combatants. You have to realize that the otherworld pirate crew only had 4 people, including the captain and officers. It seemed a few people had recently joined the otherworld pirate crew. But according to intelligence reports, these people seemed to be just ordinary people. Those 2 holding swords seemed to be Hawkeye's newly accepted disciples. As for that bald guy, he was obviously some relative of Saitama's. As for that group from Baroque Works, they were not taken seriously by Sengoku and the others. Hawkeye. By then, he would be the weakest of the 4 in the otherworld pirate crew. Moreover, according to recent intelligence, Hawkeye seemed to have neglected his sword training and had become obsessed with recipes. He even expressed his desire to become the world's #1 chef while consulting many gourmets. This former world's strongest swordsman was likely finished. Although they didn't know why Hawkeye made such a change, for the Marine, this was indeed very good news. This sortie was bound to kill everyone in the otherworld pirate crew. The worst-case scenario was that they would have to accept Pluton or Saitama escaping with serious injuries. However, the captain, Laluan, had to die no matter what. This time, the Gorosei specifically requested Garp to go. For the vice-admirals, Garp, you can discuss and decide the candidates with them. Once decided, go count the troops and warships, and be ready to deploy at any time. As for the admirals, before Sengoku could finish, Akainu spoke up directly. I'll go. Good, then this time Akainu and Akiji will go. I happen to have some matters in the science unit that need to be handled, and I can be ready to provide support at any time. As soon as Akainu finished speaking, Kizaru's voice followed. Upon hearing Kizaru's words, Akiji had no objections and simply nodded. In fact, Akiji had always wanted to see. Were the people of this otherworld pirate crew really as strong as the legends said? Chapter 85, Leaving Alabasta. The headlines in this newspaper are getting more and more alarming. In the palace of the Alabasta Kingdom. Luluan looked at the content of the newspaper in his hand. He couldn't help but complain. Pluton kills the Gorosei. Otherworld pirate crew suspected of trying to overthrow the world government? This news headline from Morgan's was truly getting more and more troublesome. It seemed as though he was intentionally trying to incite a war between the two sides. However, in Luluan's view, there was no need for Morgan's to do that. Because after Saint Nashiro was killed, the world government would definitely take action. Even without this news, he would likely have endless trouble coming to his doorstep in the future. And if he wanted to avoid this trouble, what he needed to do was actually very simple. That was, just keep doing what he was doing, and wait for those looking for trouble to deliver themselves to their deaths. With the current strength of the Otherworld pirate crew, even if everyone else in the One Piece world came at them together, it would be like child's play. Captain, are you busy right now? Outside Luluan's room, Robin's voice came through. Come in. Looking at the joyful expression on Robin's face, Luluan already knew what had happened. Did you find the other poneglyph? Yes, Captain. Now both poneglyphs have been found, and I have finished translating the one in the palace regarding the location of Pluton. The current Pluton is buried in Wano country. Wano country, huh? And what about the content on the other poneglyph? The other stone tablet contains the history of the Alabasta Kingdom. After all, the Alabasta Kingdom could have become celestial dragons in the past, but they refused. The stone tablet records related content, but since it was just found, it will take some time to decipher. After listening to Robin's report, Luluan spoke directly to her. Got it. Then let everyone get ready, it's time for us to go and see the new world. The current Alabasta Kingdom had completely gotten on the right track. Reconstruction work and such had all been completed. It had been exactly 3 days since Pluton killed the Gorosei. Looking at this overwhelming amount of news, Luluan didn't pay much attention to it. After all, once a Gorosei died, Luluan knew clearly that the world government and the Marine would definitely come after him. It was the same regardless of where he stayed. So there was no need to change his original plans because of the Marine and the world government. And there was no need to stay here waiting for the Marine and the world government to come knocking. He just needed to follow his own plans. As for the Alabasta Kingdom, if something really happened, his companions could arrive in an instant. Especially with Pluton, taking his crew and teleporting directly to the Alabasta Kingdom was not a difficult task for Pluton. Captain, are we leaving now? Bald Chang and Saitama had all sorts of strange gadgets in their hands. Luluan didn't know where these things came from or what use they had. But these two bald guys had been hanging out together a lot recently. And Bald Chang seemed quite fond of inventing strange things, so Luluan didn't ask much. Yasuo and Yon, the two brothers, looked like they were getting along well. Recently, the two brothers had been exploring the martial arts of this world together, which seemed to be a very happy thing for them. Pluton was still elusive. Just after appearing before his eyes and saying hello, he flashed away to his own room on the ship. As for Hawkeye, he was carrying a huge package on his back. According to Hawkeye, this huge package contained various kitchen utensils, special seasonings, a large number of recipes, and his study notes from this recent period. Now, Hawkeye had completely immersed himself in it. As for Nami, she was affectionately hugging Luluan's arm, and the two were walking toward the ship. Robin was already waiting on the ship. Robin had now effectively become the logistics officer and general manager of the Otherworld pirate crew. Regarding this, not only did Robin have no dissatisfaction, she was even very satisfied with this job of hers. Being able to join the Otherworld pirate crew was already the luckiest thing for Robin. Although after seeing the overwhelming news and learning that the Pluton in black armor had killed one of the Gorosei, she should have been worried about the retaliation from the world government. But for some reason, standing among this group of people, Robin really couldn't bring herself to worry. She just felt that the Marine and the world government, whom she had always feared, didn't seem as formidable as she had imagined. Although she had only joined the Otherworld pirate crew for a short time, her mindset had already undergone an earth-shattering change. Captain Luluan, can I go with you? Just as Luluan's warship was about to sail away from the port of the Alabasta Kingdom. Suddenly, the blue-haired Vivi ran all the way over, shouting at Luluan. Captain Luluan, if possible, I hope I can follow by your side. I also want to go on the ship and see the outside world. Listening to Vivi's sincere words, and thinking of the flourishing scene of the kingdom under Cobra's management, Luluan naturally did not refuse Vivi's request. With a thought, a sea current instantly swept toward Vivi, wrapping her up and sending her onto the warship. After this period, Luluan's overall strength had increased by an unknown amount compared to before. Contact with seawater every day could improve Luluan's overall strength to a certain extent. Luluan was now able to easily drive about tens of thousands of cubic meters of seawater. Moreover, his current physical fitness was far beyond what it used to be. Luluan now felt that his physical strength alone was comparable to a marine vice-admiral. Coupled with his own traits like infinite strength, sea king, handsome, etc. The current Luluan could fully be considered a genuine admiral-level combatant. After bringing Vivi onto the ship, under Nami's control, the warship quickly moved and headed toward the new world. Luluan's departure did not hide his tracks at all. Whether it was the newscrews flying around or the people in the Alabasta Kingdom, they all clearly saw the figure of their group leaving. And the moment Luluan and his group left, the world government and the Marine immediately received the news. Chapter 86, All Forces Attack. A narrow encounter. 2-1, what did you say? Those people from the Otherworld pirate crew are heading our way? Marineford. Akainu and Sengoku instantly locked eyes after receiving the latest news. They had originally planned to wait for orders from the world government after all units were assembled before setting out for the Kingdom of Alabasta at any time. But to their surprise, the group from the Otherworld pirate crew was no longer staying there. It seemed they had caught wind of the situation as well. However, after learning that the Marine was going to take action, shouldn't they have sailed in another direction? Why were they heading toward Marineford instead? Could they be trying to take them by surprise and enter the new world? Were they planning to escape using their cadre's abilities? Akainu and Sengoku immediately began discussing the matter as soon as they received the news. Meanwhile, the other generals and the various marine ships were basically ready by now. A total of over 10 warships and more than 20,000. Marineford elites. Just the cannonballs alone numbered in the tens of thousands. In this war, the world government was no longer aiming for the basic goal of victory. The world government wanted to literally erase the Otherworld pirate crew and the Alabasta Kingdom from this world. The Marines' combat power was now basically ready, just waiting for the two Gorosei from the world government, the CP-0 unit, and the God's Knights to converge. During the communications over the past 2 days, Sengoku had confirmed that both the CP unit and the God's Knights would be sending their highest-ranking commanders. And the strength of these two individuals was only slightly inferior to the Marine headquarters admiral level. The two of them together would basically have no problem dealing with an admiral. Furthermore, both were taijutsu masters who had never consumed a devil fruit. Since the operational plan for this mission might involve using a large amount of sea stone against Pluton, those responsible for dealing with Pluton could only be taijutsu masters like Garp, the CP commander, and the Grand Master of the God's Knights. Marshal, according to our plan, the sea stone nets, sea stone bullets, related firearms, and everything else involving sea stone are ready. With Lord Mercury and Saint Nashiro present, Pluton will surely be killed in one fell swoop. And against a taijutsu master like Saitama, Akiji's side can provide a very effective restrictive role, at which point St. Peter and I will deliver the fatal blow. Good preparation, but do not let your guard down. According to Kizaru and Garp, these people have unexpectedly strong abilities. You should communicate more with Garp to ensure nothing goes wrong. Rest assured, Marshal. By the time Sengoku finished his instructions, Akainu had already walked far away. Hearing the indifferent tone in Akainu's voice, Sengoku knew that Akainu might be feeling some dissatisfaction because the Marine and the world government were being overly serious and solemn regarding the Otherworld pirate crew. Even when dealing with the four Emperor's pirate crews or Whitebeard, the world government might not have been so cautious. In Akainu's view, being overly cautious was not only a lack of trust in his own strength but also showed a posture that was too weak toward the otherworld pirate crew. Seeing Akainu's attitude, Sengoku found it hard to say anything more. After all, even he himself didn't know what the true strength of the otherworld pirate crew was. The results of the several encounters and battles so far had been truly bizarre. The fights were too quick, basically ending in a very short time. Generally speaking, battles between powerhouses take a long time. After all, for these monsters of the great seas, their physical strength and endurance are quite terrifying. But Kizaru and Garp were heavily injured, and Saint Nashiro, one of the Gorosei, died directly. While these events showcased the absolute combat power of the otherworld pirate crew, they remain too mysterious after all. However, often beneath such a veil of mystery, there hides an essence that might be relatively weak. This had always been Sengoku's viewpoint. It was also the viewpoint of the various admirals and vice-admirals who had been influenced by Sengoku. Those who had not actually come into contact with the otherworld pirate crew still held the same view in their minds. Perhaps the marine school of thought was indeed somewhat consistent in certain basic ways of thinking. They were all a bit like those who won't give up until they've reached the end of their rope. Even though Garp, Douglas, and the others had been sharing their opinions while communicating with other generals these past few days, looking at the dense rows of warships behind them, such thorough preparations, and so many elites, these marine generals really couldn't bring themselves to be afraid. Because the firepower and the combat strength of the personnel were simply too powerful. How is it? That brat still isn't listening to you, is he? Sigh, hearing the voice of his good friend Garp, Sengoku turned around. Garp's rough, large hand slapped directly onto Sengoku's shoulder. Don't worry so much. We just need to make the best preparations we can, and that will be enough. Garp spoke to comfort Sengoku, but Garp himself was the one whose heart was pounding the most. Others might not notice Garp's emotions. But Sengoku, as a friend of many years, immediately noticed Garp's recent abnormality. Ever since it was confirmed that the Marine and the world government were going to face the otherworld pirate crew head-on, Garp seemed to have changed entirely. Although he had been going around talking to the generals and mentioning some characteristics of the otherworld pirate crew, Sengoku knew that his old friend had never talked this much before a battle. Garp, by the way, what have you been talking to them about all this time? And Douglas and the others, they should have all received your orders, right? Sengoku, I've been talking about things to watch out for when fighting the otherworld pirate crew. You just sit steadily here in Marineford and prepare for the Marines' other plan. Don't worry, for this sortie, I will try my best to protect our Marine safety no matter what, and let them keep their lives as much as possible. Garp whispered these words into Sengoku's ear. After hearing Garp's words, Sengoku could roughly guess exactly what kind of content Garp, Douglas, and the others had been discussing with these generals. Garp had the intention to protect these junior Marine boys and let them return alive as much as possible. To Sengoku, this was indeed the best news. Since this battle involved the CP unit and the God's Knights, according to Garp's idea, it would be best to let the world government's people clash with the otherworld pirate crew first. As for the Marine side, since the otherworld pirate crew had already taken the initiative to attack, and there was no need to invade the Alabasta kingdom, there was no need for these elites to give their all. Several members of the otherworld pirate crew possessed Haushaku. These ordinary soldiers should stay as far away as possible when the two sides started fighting. As for whether this battle must be won, that remained to be seen. It depended on whether the world government side could cause effective casualties to the otherworld pirate crew. The Marine side might really have to act mainly as support, just as Garp suggested. Sengoku only nodded after hearing Garp's words. Looking at Garp's obviously complicated gaze, Sengoku knew even more clearly just how much pressure that bald man had put on Garp during their battle for Garp to choose to act this way. Regarding how powerful those two cadres of the otherworld pirate crew were, Sengoku had actually been pushing his imagination to the highest peak during this time. After all, according to the reactions of Garp and Kizaru, these two were definitely strong, the kind of strength that was quite ridiculous. At the very least, they were much more powerful than an average admiral, even possessing the strength to kill one. But even so, no matter how much Sengoku raised his expectations and his estimation of their combat power, he still felt that this time, the lineup of the Marine and the world government was enough to take down this otherworld pirate crew. After all, with such a lineup, even if 2 or 3 4 Emperor's pirate crews banded together, they could be directly annihilated. Dealing with just these few people from the otherworld pirate crew, Sengoku really couldn't imagine the possibility of losing. But there was nothing wrong with Garp doing what he did. Although it would cause the fighting will of these ordinary Marine soldiers to decline, it wouldn't affect the overall situation in the end. The ones who would truly face those few people from the otherworld pirate crew would still be these top-tier combatants. Garp clearly hadn't sent anyone to try and persuade Akainu, Akiji, or the others. Presumably, after this battle, both sides would have a clearer understanding of each other's strength. Watching Garp gradually walk away, Sengoku was also thinking. Perhaps after this great battle, Garp will no longer be as afraid as he is now. Captain, it is estimated that we will reach the entrance to the New World from the Grand Line this afternoon. On the warship of the otherworld pirate crew. Laluan nodded casually upon hearing Hawkeye's words. By now, more than a day had passed since they left the Alabastic Kingdom. During this day and more, through the news kuz, Laluan had also learned quite a bit of news. However, this news was indeed something he could have guessed himself. Having given the world government such a big slap in the face, the world government would definitely try every possible way to retaliate and come looking for trouble. Although the newspaper also roughly mentioned the lineup on the world government's side, Laluan really didn't care much and casually tossed the newspaper aside. Vivi and Nami, on the other hand, kept exclaiming after seeing the newspaper. Obviously, such a lineup had frightened the two girls a bit. But it was only for a moment. Because the atmosphere on the entire ship was simply too harmonious, no one cared at all about the so-called danger that was about to arrive. Hawkeye, your cooking skills are really getting better and better. I feel like it won't be long before you're the #1 chef in this world. Captain, you can't say that. The path of culinary arts is vast and profound. I have only just touched the surface. During these days, Hawkeye had been running around and had indeed learned some things. His cooking was even more delicious than the royal chefs in the palace. And in recent days, Laluan no longer heard Yasuo's complaints about Hawkeye. Before, because Hawkeye was always pestering him, Yasuo had often complained to Laluan. But now, everything was peaceful. Yasuo had even started to take the initiative to praise Hawkeye. The food made is much more delicious than the meals on Runeterra. And this was the first word of praise Yasuo had given Hawkeye. On Laluan's warship, it was still as comfortable and pleasant as ever. The warship sailed at a normal speed on the Grand Line, with no one deliberately speeding up or slowing down the ship. They just let the warship drift. In another direction, more than 10 warships were grandly sailing toward Laluan's location. The two leading ones were warships with admiral-level configurations, and their magnificent decorations represented the extraordinary status of their owners. Even a Marine headquarters admiral would not have such luxurious decorations. These two warships were the vessels of the two Gorosei. And next to these two warships were two standard admiral-configured warships. These two had their own unique and distinct styles, being the admiral warships of Akainu and Akiji respectively, and they were also filled with their adjutants and elite subordinates. Behind these 4 warships, a doghead battleship sat right in the center. This warship, naturally, came from Garp. At this time, Garp was not sitting on the rattan chair on the deck as he used to. Instead, he stood at the very front of the deck with a cold and solemn gaze, looking as if he were ready to strike at any moment. To Garp's left and right sides were the CP unit and the God's Knights respectively. Further to the sides were the warships of the Marine Vice Admiral units. All the personnel added up to nearly 30,000 people, and the aura was extraordinarily grand. Even Akainu and Akiji, standing on the deck at this moment, were filled with heroic pride. After all, from the time they became admirals until now, they had never fought such an affluent battle. So many warships sailing together was truly unprecedented. And in the sky at the very rear, which no one noticed, Kizaru, who had previously said he was going to interface with the science unit, had now turned into a small speck of light, following far outside the Marines' formation. At this distance, even with Kizaru's observation haki, he could not be perceived at all. Only Garp would occasionally glance toward where Kazara was. He seemed a bit worried that the admiral, who had promised him certain things, would not show up. The fleet's army set out in full force. Except for Garp, the faces of the top combatants were all filled with heroic spirit and overflowing with battle intent. Meanwhile, the expressions on the faces of Garp and some other vice-admirals were extremely solemn. The massive marine fleet, with everyone harboring their own thoughts, was thus advancing at full speed toward the direction of the otherworld pirate crew. Chapter 87, Let Loose. Let's have a grand battle. 2-1, Captain, quite a few people are coming our way from ahead. On Laluan's warship. Everyone present had been quite leisurely enjoying the gourmet food provided by Hawkeye. Suddenly, Saitama, Pluton, and the others all raised their heads in unison, gazing toward the endless ocean in the distance. Then Yon spoke up. This group is coming for us, and their numbers are quite large. Do I need to go over now and deal with them all? Brother, how about we go together? Seeing Yon request to fight, Yasuo immediately followed suit. However, seeing the two of them taking the initiative to fight, Luluan didn't find it strange at all. After all, since arriving in this world, these two brothers had consulted with quite a few well-known local martial artists. This was a habit of the two brothers. To consult with local martial artists and learn about the moves of different schools. Furthermore, the Kingdom of Alabasta truly didn't have any opponents that interested the two brothers. Now that he saw the two brothers finally showing interest, Luluan naturally wouldn't stop them. It's just, they were still a bit too far away. He didn't even know who the Marines had sent out, so there was really no way to watch the show yet. No rush. Let's finish our meal first. Once they get here, I'll leave it to you guys to show off. Luluan said while continuing to eat. Seeing this, Yasuo and Yon naturally didn't say anything more. They sat back down and continued to enjoy the delicacies prepared by Hawkeye. They allowed the warship to continue sailing slowly along the Grand Line. Ah, I'm so full. Hawkeye, your cooking skills are definitely among the very best in this world now. Luluan, satisfied with food and drink, couldn't help but give Hawkeye a thumbs up. With such a good cook, practicing the sword before was really a waste. It had only been about a month or so since Hawkeye started honing his culinary skills. But now, Hawkeye's cooking was already better than that of the royal chefs in the Kingdom of Alabasta. If he hadn't practiced the sword, he might have been the world's #1 chef by now. After eating, Luluan stood up and stretched. This stretch could only be described as the center of attention. Because now, Luluan's warship was densely surrounded by other warships. Luluan took a quick look around and indeed saw several very familiar faces. One person had many tattoos, his right arm was a sword, and from his left chest to his elbow were roses and cherry blossoms. He wore a boutonniere, a rose, a dark red suit, a marine cap, black leather gloves, and a marine admiral's coat over his shoulders. The other was equally tall, wearing a white suit vest and a dark blue shirt. Draped in a marine coat and wearing a green sleep mask on his forehead, he looked like a very lazy person who loved to sleep. These two were the other two admirals of Marineford. Akainu, Sakazuki. Akiji, Kuzan. Captain, it seems we've been completely and utterly surrounded. When Yon said this, there was no emotional fluctuation, he was simply stating an obvious fact. Luluan continued to scan the surroundings. The lineup the Marines brought this time was truly more impressive than he had imagined. Besides Admirals Akainu and Akiji, Garp had also arrived, along with a group of Marine Vice-Admirals and 2 old men. These 2 old men were clearly 2 of the other Gorosei. It seemed Saint Nashiro's death hadn't taught the other old men a lesson. In addition to the 2 Gorosei and the 2 admirals, there were 2 unfamiliar faces. Although Luluan hadn't seen them before, he could roughly guess their identities. One was dressed in a white suit, standing at the very front of the CP unit, who were all in uniform. His muscles were knotted all over, and he looked twice as tall as Akainu. He was clearly a master of taijutsu. The other wore a luxurious black military uniform and also held a long sword in his hand. He should be a great swordsman. He wondered how this person compared to Hawkeye. Luluan. While Luluan and the members of the otherworld pirate crew looked at the surrounding warships, pointing at the people standing on them and whispering, one of the two Gorosei finally couldn't help but shout Luluan's name. After that shout, Luluan walked directly to the front of the deck and looked at that person. The man was a burly old man dressed in a black suit and white shirt, bald with a double handlebar mustache and a birthmark on his forehead. For some reason, the moment he saw this person, Luluan felt as if he were looking at his own son. In the truest sense of the word, son. Quite literally. I am Topman Bosley Saint, one of the Gorosei. I have long heard of you and your otherworld pirate crew. I must say, young man, you are the boldest I have ever seen. And that kid called Pluton has some strength, but unfortunately, he's a hothead. Topman Bosley Saint. The moment he heard the name, Luluan understood why he felt like this fat old man before him was his son. This old man was a user of the mythical Zoan Fingshi fruit, which granted him the power to control water. The term Sea King could completely be described as the superior ability of this Fingshi fruit. No wonder Luluan felt a sense of familiarity after seeing this old man. These mythical Zoan devil fruits of the Gorosei were all very good. It seemed that after this battle ended, Pluton should have a few more excellent experimental materials. And besides, Pluton, a hothead? Pluton's age was likely longer than the existence of the One Piece world. This old man really talked himself into a grave the moment he opened his mouth. However, Luluan turned his head to look. Pluton had a faint smile on his lips. He seemed strangely happy. Luluan, your crimes are heinous. I, Akainu, hereby announce on behalf of the Marines that today is the day you and the otherworld pirate crew die. This sea does not allow for the existence of such extreme evil like you. Killing a member of the 7 warlords of the sea, seizing an affiliated nation as your own territory, and boldly plotting the assassination of Saint Nashiro of the Gorosei and the CP unit prepare to die. Seeing that there was no response from Luluan's side, Akainu immediately pronounced judgment on Luluan with righteous indignation. After finishing his words, without any hesitation, he simply waved his hand. The moment Akainu waved his hand, the dozen or so marine warships surrounding Luluan's ship simultaneously erupted with massive roars. Bang bang bang. Bang 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 bang. The sound of cannon fire rang out almost simultaneously from these dozen warships. Black cannonballs poured toward Luluan's ship like raindrops. On the ship, neither Luluan nor Pluton made a move. A figure with a high ponytail flashed to the edge of the ship, drew the unsheathed blade from his waist, and swung it fiercely toward the sky ahead. Whoosh! A sudden gale appeared, forming a massive barrier that enveloped the surroundings of Luluan's warship. Wind wall. As the cannonballs hit the wind wall, they seemed to lose all momentum and fell powerlessly into the sea. Too cool, brother Suo. Seeing Yasuo take action, Luluan couldn't help but shout out. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as Pluton directly using a black hole to transport all the cannonballs away, the visual effect of this wind wall was definitely cooler. Moreover, when Yasuo acted, drawing and sheathing his sword carried an inexplicable sense of elegance. He really knew how to show off. After the first round of shelling ended, Akainu's gaze locked onto Yasuo. Even before the formal battle began, Akainu's brow furrowed because of Yasuo's move. They had actually seen relevant intelligence on these people who appeared on the otherworld pirate cruise ship. But Yasuo's action immediately turned their intelligence into a joke. This level of skill didn't look like combat power that could be ignored. Ha 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 ha. To think your otherworld pirate crew has produced such remarkable newcomers again. Let this old man see what level these newcomers on your ship are at. Seeing that this round of shelling had no effect, Garp burst into laughter on his dog-head battleship and challenged Yasuo. Kid, if you have the guts, come to my ship for a fight. And the one next to you with the 2 swords, both of you come together. At this moment, Garp ripped off the Justice cloak behind him, pressed his shoulder, and loosened up his arm. An invisible aura began to spread toward the surroundings. Seeing Garp's vigorous fighting spirit, Yasuo didn't hesitate at all and directly turned into a blue and white gale, vanishing from Luluan's ship. In the next instant, he was on Garp's dog-head battleship, arriving not far in front of Garp. Seeing his brother go over, Yon's figure also instantly vanished. An afterimage appeared on the dog-head battleship in a flash. It was as if he had suddenly bounced over from Luluan's ship. Upon seeing the two brothers appear before him, Garp's originally clenched fists and vigorous fighting spirit momentarily stalled. He could explain Yasuo's movement, he must have consumed a wind-type devil fruit. But Garp couldn't quite see how Yon had gotten across? Garp had initially thought he could handle these two new swordsmen from Luluan's ship by himself. After all, after seeing that wind wall just now, Garp had roughly judged that their strength should be slightly stronger than an average vice admiral at Marineford. But what was going on? It seemed his judgment was a bit off. The feeling these two gave him was extremely eerie. They clearly looked very young, yet they seemed to possess incredible combat experience, as if they had fought tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of battles. For some reason, looking at the two of them, Garp suddenly remembered the scene when he first met Saitama. Justice, what a high-sounding word. You Marines have somewhat insulted it. However, the feeling you give me is indeed unusual. So, face the wind. After arriving in front of Garp, Yasuo directly drew the unsheathed blade from his waist and attacked Garp. However, this attack wasn't actually a move from the Steel Tempest or other Gale sword-style techniques, but rather some sword techniques from the One Piece world he had learned from those martial artists in the Kingdom of Alabasta during this time. Yasuo intentionally wanted to hone his skills. But when Yasuo's sword thrust forward, Garp felt something unexpected. When this young man was speaking just now, he had clearly perceived a massive sense of crisis. But now that the attack was coming, the offensive power was a bit weaker than he had imagined. It was just that the sword in the boy's hand was likely one of the supreme-grade swords. Its sharpness was far beyond what an ordinary sword could compare to. However, Yasuo's attack was indeed within Garp's range of acceptance. Clang! 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 As Yasuo's blade collided with Garp's iron fist, sounds of clashing metal rang out. However, as Garp's warship intentionally withdrew, the dog-head battleship gradually sailed toward the side. Gradually, the encirclement closed in again, as if the dog-head battleship had purposely lured Yasuo and Yon away. Saitama, do you have the guts to fight me? Seeing Garp's dog-head battleship sail away, Akainu directly shouted at Saitama on Luluan's ship. All of this was naturally the Marines' plan. The goal was to disperse the members of the Otherworld pirate crew and defeat them one by one. The plan was very simple, but the Marines weren't worried it wouldn't work. After all, these few people in the Otherworld pirate crew had very distinct characteristics and abilities. Similarly, they all had the common failing of the strong. And that was arrogance. According to the intelligence currently held by the Marines, the people on the Otherworld pirate crew side had never refused a challenge from others. Really? You really want to have a fight with me? Great, great. I agree, where are we going to fight? Upon hearing Akainu's words, Saitama immediately jumped up in excitement. It had been a long time. It had truly been a very long time since Saitama had heard someone take the initiative to challenge him. And this person wasn't a monster. In Saitama's perception, this person's righteousness was so upright it was almost wicked. He was definitely a top-tier figure like those in the Hero Association. Speaking of which, Saitama felt he hadn't had a formal sparring match with anyone for a very, very long time. He was a bit socially anxious, and no one had ever invited him to spar. Although Saitama wanted to fight, he could never find the opportunity. After all, everyone he encountered was a monster, and monsters were often killed with a single punch, offering no pleasure in battle at all. Now that someone was taking the initiative to spar, Saitama couldn't be happier. If it's a spar, can you count me in? I want to play too. Seeing Saitama so happy, Bald Chang also skipped over to Saitama's side. The two of them held hands and looked at Akainu with faces full of anticipation. Of course you can. Then you two follow me. A contemptuous curve hooked at the corner of Akainu's mouth as he immediately turned his warship around. I know of a small island not far ahead. There, we can truly let loose and fight. After confirming that Akainu was sincerely inviting them to spar, the two were extremely happy, as if they had found some fun toy. And on the ship, before Saitama disappeared, Liliwan gave an earnest and worried instruction. You two, whatever you do, do not let loose, okay? Chapter 88, Pluton's Serious Punch. How dangerous, that was almost a disaster. Seeing Saitama nod sensibly, Liliwan breathed a sigh of relief. Since arriving in this world, this was the first time Liliwan felt such an intense sense of crisis. He nearly died. After Saitama and Bald Chang left with Akainu, only Pluton, Liliwan, Hawkeye, and the three girls remained on the ship. Several warships had departed with Akainu, Akiji, Garp, and the great swordsman from the God's Knights. Now, only 5 warships remained. The 2 leading ships carried 2 Gorosei, followed by the Supreme Commander of the CP unit and 2 Marine Vice Admirals. The Marine troops were basically hiding behind the world government troops. This was the case on all 3 battlefields. It was obvious. They must have taken Garp's words to heart. Liliwan, your otherworld pirate crew has been roaming freely on this sea for some time. Come to think of it, we don't even have any information on the people on your ship. Where exactly do you come from? Facing Liliwan, Vasily Saint said in a deep voice. That question of yours is hilarious. Doesn't our pirate crew's name already say it? We come from another world. Facing Vasily Saint's inquiry, Liliwan answered without hesitation. Upon hearing Liliwan's answer, Vasily Saint laughed. He laughed louder and louder. Laughing. Until the end, he suddenly restrained his laughter, turning to look at Liliwan with a face full of rage. Do you think I'm stupid? From another world, why don't you say you came from the moon? Since you are so unappreciative, don't blame us for being impolite. 0, go and capture the enemies before me. The moment Vasily Saint finished speaking, the CP unit supreme commander behind him let out a sinister laugh. Mere pirates, you are truly too arrogant, daring to anger the master. Looking at this muscular man before him, this was the first time Liliwan knew his name. 0. Perhaps this wasn't even a name, just a code name. Liliwan didn't think the world government was stupid enough to just send a muscle-bound idiot to his death. Sure enough, the moment the muscular man moved, Vasily Saint also raised his hand. A massive, arc-shaped ocean wave circle surrounding Liliwan's warship formed instantly. Then, just like the wind wall from earlier, the seawater rose slowly into the sky from all sides of Liliwan's warship, forming a massive seawater sphere enclosure. It completely enveloped the entire ship, including Liliwan and his party. At the same time, thin streams of seawater shot out from these water curtains, encircling the muscular man, forming a thin armor of seawater. Because Zero's movements were quite fast, this seawater armor was constantly being broken and then recondensed. But it must be said, this move would indeed be very effective against devil fruit users. After all, seawater has an extremely powerful weakening effect on devil fruit users. Basically, everyone who has eaten a devil fruit is a complete landlubber. Contacting seawater would instantly weaken them, and combined with a taijutsu expert like Zero, if Pluton had actually eaten a devil fruit, this move by Vasily Saint would definitely be a very effective tactic. However, Pluton hadn't eaten one. At this moment, Vasily Saint's raised hand was trembling slightly, and fine beads of sweat were oozing from his forehead. Obviously, this move consumed a large amount of his stamina. However, even though his posture and movements looked somewhat disheveled, Vasily Saint's face was brimming with a very smug smile. With such a massive ocean waterfall, plus a top-tier taijutsu master like Zero, in Vasily Saint's view, it would definitely cause great trouble for Liliwan and Pluton, and it was highly likely to succeed in one strike. But on the ship, Liliwan really wanted to laugh watching this combined technique. The moment Vasily Saint activated his ability, Liliwan had actually felt his inherent suppression. Vasily Saint was playing with water, but in Liliwan's eyes, the water was playing with Vasily Saint. With just a thought, these seawater waves could instantly backfire and drown this guy in front of him. He could even strip him of his ability to control seawater if he wanted to. But Liliwan didn't plan to do that now. Because compared to this old man, this muscular man was clearly more to Luluan's liking. Since mastering his infinite strength, Luluan had never fought anyone in close combat, which was why Luluan had signaled Pluton when Vasily Saint attacked earlier. If Luluan hadn't stopped him and Pluton had attacked, the battle might have ended too quickly. He really wanted to train and have a real fight. This Zero in front of him was clearly an excellent sparring partner. Boom! As Luluan took a step forward, a peerless haki that dominated the heavens and the earth instantly swept across the entire sea. Even Akainu, who was driving the warship and had already sailed some distance away, suddenly turned his head to look at the sphere wrapped in the ocean. In the center of the ocean sphere, black and red lightning erupted from the center of the ocean sphere. An invisible pressure instantly descended upon the entire sea. In a split second, Akainu felt not only his spirit feeling pressure, but even his own body felt considerable pressure. And this terrifying aura directly shattered the ocean sphere. Those seawater waves seemed to fear this amazing conqueror's haki. Above the entire ocean, dark clouds appeared and churned endlessly. The overwhelming aura was still continuously strengthening at this moment. Vasily Saint stood stupidly on the spot. Looking at Luluan before him, such a young, tender face, a boy who smiled so warmly and brightly, yet his aura was so terrifying. Whether it was white beard or red hair, on this ocean, there was probably no one whose conqueror's haki could compare to this boy. This aura even reminded Vasily Saint of Imusama. How could this be? How could this boy possess such a terrifying aura? Vasily Saint muttered to himself, truly unable to understand this question. Because on Luluan, at first, he really didn't feel any aura of a king at all, as if he were just a leisurely young man. But the moment he stepped out, he directly became the pinnacle of the ocean, a true supreme overlord. This kind of spirit made Vasily Saint involuntarily think of rocks. After feeling Luluan's aura, the two Gorosei and Zero's expressions changed instantly. Their intelligence was wrong again. This captain of the otherworld pirate crew was likely not someone to be trifled with. However, the battle had already begun, and they had absolutely no way back. They could only fight. Now, they also had a reason that they absolutely could not lose. Boom! Crack! Two bursts of Conqueror's haki erupted simultaneously. They joined forces and pressed towards Luluan's side. Black and red lightning intertwined, seemingly roaring against each other. The dark clouds in the sky had also clearly divided into two large blocks, competing against each other. However, the corner of Luluan's mouth curled into a scornful smile, and the aura on his body was still strengthening bit by bit. Although the two Gorosei combined could currently contend with his aura, Luluan knew clearly that this aura was not his peak. Saint Peter and Vasily Saint looked at each other, seemingly feeling that Luluan's aura was still continuously strengthening. The situation is not good. This thought instantly popped into Saint Peter's mind. So he signaled Zero directly. Zero didn't hesitate at all and punched directly towards Luluan, his fist covered in jet black armament haki. This punch was powerful and heavy. It was probably not inferior to Garp's iron fist. This punch even produced a sonic boom. The CP unit's supreme commander clearly had considerable weight. However, facing this punch, Luluan did not choose to dodge. In the shocked pupils of St. Peter and Vasily Saint, Luluan's fair palm clenched into a fist that looked very delicate. The fair, tender fist, clenched tightly, punched towards Zero's fist. There was not even any armament haki wrapped around Luluan's fist. But just such a swung punch caught Zero's punch. Luluan's punch even directly shattered Zero's fist. The fist originally wrapped in armament haki, which looked like the hardest part, was directly shattered by Luluan's plain, unadorned punch. Immediately, the entire palm turned into countless fragments, and blood sprayed out instantly. Zero's expression changed drastically. He jumped back to the warship he was originally standing on, and his other hand force slapped his broken palm, forcibly stopping the bleeding. Is this guy's strength too low? Or is my strength already too high now? After Luluan's punch landed, he didn't feel any resistance in front of his fist, as if he had hit a piece of foam board, directly shattering that foam. At this moment, Luluan was full of disappointment. This big guy's strength was even weaker than he had imagined. Luluan immediately chased after him and punched towards Zero again. However, because Laluan's speed was relatively slow and Zero's combat experience was relatively richer, the two looked quite lively for a while. St. Peter and Vasily Saint watched this scene, their faces becoming increasingly ugly. Because in their view, Laluan's current behavior was just toying with Zero. And this operation was more difficult than the two had imagined. However, regardless of what Laluan was thinking, playing with Zero at this moment, both knew that they must attack immediately to take down a portion of the otherworld pirate crew first. Now Laluan was chasing Zero, and on this ship, only Pluton remained. As for Hawkeye and the three women, they were naturally ignored by the two. Facing this Pluton, who looked extraordinary, the two naturally dared not be the slightest bit arrogant. Vasily Saint immediately transformed into his strongest state. A huge wild boar, tusks like halberds, copper skin and iron bones, thick fur. Above the pig's head was a circle of water, looking somewhat sacred. After transforming into a wild boar, Vasily Saint's ability to control the ocean seemed to become even stronger. Compared to the previous seawater circle, an even larger, heavier ocean sphere instantly condensed and formed again. While condensing the ocean sphere on the periphery, there were also waves after waves constantly crashing towards Laluan's warship. Moreover, the wild boar that Vasily Saint transformed into was also surrounded by a circle of deep blue currents that looked significantly deeper than ordinary seawater. On the ship, Hawkeye was swinging his sword one after another, and Nami, Vivi, Robin, and others also attacked one after another, dealing with the waves crashing towards the ship. Pluton stood on the deck, watching all this with interest, seemingly having no intention of making a move. That detached attitude made Vasily Saint very angry. The pig eyes, as big as lanterns, turned scarlet at this moment, the pig mouth with sticky strings open wide, and he roared at Pluton. "You damn brat, you really look down on people, go to hell." After speaking, the huge wild boar suddenly exploded with unimaginable speed and slammed fiercely towards the direction where Pluton was. The wild boar stepped on the ocean currents, moving faster and faster, seemingly able to break through all obstacles. The power displayed by this strike definitely exceeded that of an ordinary admiral. On the tusks of this giant wild boar, black and red lightning intertwined, wrapped in jet black armament hockey. This was a hockey infusion wild boar charge. However, looking at this wild boar, facing this powerful attack that seemed capable of destroying everything, Pluton showed a look of disgust. This attack was also Pluton's first real attack in the true sense. Because Pluton was clearly disgusted by the wild boar in front of him. He didn't just give a look or extend a finger like before. This time, Pluton clenched his fist, raised his arm, and swung a punch fiercely towards the very tip of the wild boar's tusks. This punch still didn't carry any hockey. But this punch was thrown. At the moment when the fist and the wild boar's tusks were about to make contact, an unimaginable shockwave spread forward from Pluton's fist. The wild boar, which had been charging forward and seemingly capable of destroying everything, instantly turned into a sky full of blood mist and disappeared from the spot. And in front of the direction Pluton's punch was thrown, a huge crack appeared in the seawater, and this crack was still spreading forward and inward at an unimaginable speed. In the sky, a similar crack appeared. The sky full of dark clouds was forcibly smashed into a long, narrow crack by the punch, and sunlight penetrated through the crack, as if forming a huge sword of light. Kizaru, at this moment, he was originally following far behind, watching this scene that suddenly appeared in front of him, his mouth wide open. It was as if some supreme god had forcibly cut a hole in this continent. Hugh Pluton retracted his fist, looked at the scene in front of him, and a smile curled at the corner of his mouth. It seems that the bald guy was right, punching seriously really makes one feel refreshed. Chapter 89, All-Out War, Death of Akainu. Looking at Pluton, who was still holding his punching pose on the warship. Looking at the punch right before his eyes that seemed to have shattered the entire world. Looking at Vasily Saint, one of the Gorosei who was similar in strength to himself, still turning into a mist of blood after unleashing his strongest state. St. Peter stood dumbfounded on the ship. Everyone on the surrounding warships was equally dumbfounded on their ships. According to their plan, once the two sides began to engage, they had other follow-up actions to carry out in coordination. The soldiers on the other warships were supposed to continuously fire sea stone cannonballs at Luluan's warship while the two sides were locked in a fierce melee. They had prepared these cannonballs for a very long time. And they were all prepared to be used in this battle, with the targets, naturally, being Pluton and Luluan on the ship. Although they didn't know what abilities Luluan had, according to the Marine's current intelligence, Luluan should also be a devil fruit user. In the past, pulverizing the Marine G-16 base into dust was Luluan's doing. But this battle was truly too fast, and the combat situation was too unbelievable. Pluton, who originally possessed a suspected space-type ability, did not use his devil fruit ability in this battle. From the beginning of the battle until now, Pluton had participated almost not at all, only making this one final move. Yet, just by throwing a single punch, it directly split the entire ocean in two. Even now, the seawater was still pouring into the crack. This punch from Pluton refreshed everyone's perception, whether it was the soldiers on the warships or St. Peter, one of the Gorosei. Everyone felt like they were dreaming. Originally, Luluan's attack had already shocked them greatly. The Supreme Conqueror's haki, combined with the immense power to kill the CP Supreme Commander Zero with a single punch. Coupled with the devil fruit ability that Luluan had yet to display, they already considered Luluan's strength on paper to be exaggerated. But this punch from Pluton didn't just open up the entire sky, it shattered everyone's worldview. This could no longer be described as just powerful. Can Imo-sama achieve this level? This thought couldn't help but pop into St. Peter's mind. According to their original tactics, Vasily Saint and Zero were supposed to tangle with Luluan and Pluton, while he would be responsible for intercepting Hawkeye. During the battle, they would use massive amounts of sea stone cannonballs to bombard them repeatedly, and combined with Vasily Saint's ability to control seawater, they would weaken Luluan and Pluton's combat power. When the final battle needed to conclude, he should have already taken care of Hawkeye, or at least severely injured him. Then he would step in to end the battle. After all, the fruit he consumed was the mythical Zoan-type sandworm fruit, and fighting on a marine warship didn't give him any advantage, but regardless, as one of the Gorosei, he absolutely possessed the ability to clean up the aftermath. However, St. Peter really hadn't expected that this situation would not be a cleanup, but a one-sided massacre. Hey! Why are you stunned? We're still fighting. That burly man is dead, so you should be stronger than him, right? Come onto the ship and fight me. While St. Peter was still shocked by everything that had just happened, Luluan, on the ship, had already locked his gaze onto him. Zero's weakness was beyond Luluan's expectations, and his goal of having a sparring partner hadn't been met at all. The moment Pluton threw the punch, Zero happened to dodge his fist, dodging to a position behind Vasily Saint, and also into the wind pressure of Pluton's punch. The outcome was naturally obvious. Luluan lost his sparring partner, so he turned his gaze to the only Gorosei left alive on the field. If he remembered correctly, this person had a lot of health. Although it seemed he was very powerful in sand, and it appeared that Alabasta was his home turf, even without sand, on this warship, he was not comparable to the muscular Zero. He was absolutely the most suitable sparring partner for him right now. Wouldn't it be bad to fight on this warship? How about we go find a small island? I want to spar with you properly. As long as you can hold on, you can leave alive. Looking at St. Peter, Luluan stated the most tempting condition and price for St. Peter. What is this? At this moment, on the Doghead battleship, Garp had been fighting Yasuo punch by punch, inwardly feeling shocked by the man with the high ponytail in front of him. The next second, a white light that seemed to tear the entire world apart appeared before his eyes. The entire sea area was split in two, and even the sky seemed to have been sliced open. The entire expanse of dark clouds, originally formed by the Conqueror's haki of Luluan and the two Gorosei, was forcibly torn apart. Garp looked at everything before him, feeling only disbelief. The energy contained within that white light just now had far exceeded the limit of what Garp could perceive. In Garp's memory, no person, or thing, had ever been able to create such a powerful energy fluctuation. This seemed to be a level that could no longer appear in a mere battle. It seems the battle over there has ended, brother. The path to destruction is shorter than imaginable, likewise, fools are beyond saving. Yasuo saw the white light that tore through the sky and sea, But he didn't find it strange, he just glanced at it and replied to his brother. Don't worry about them, let's continue. Your fighting style and the power within you are very interesting. I think I can learn many things from you in this battle. Yasuo turned to look at Garp, speaking in a calm tone. However, Yasuo's words made Garp's brow furrow even tighter. Because when Yasuo said this, Garp could clearly feel that the temperament of the swordsman in front of him seemed to have undergone some changes. It seemed that an invisible haki was gradually erupting from this person's body. It was an aura of vicissitudes and arrogance. That was Conqueror's haki. Moreover, in Garp's line of sight, Yasuo's sword, which originally had no armament haki covering it, now unknowingly crawled with a touch of ink-black armament haki. In Yasuo's pupils, a trace of red light also suddenly lit up. Could it be that he learned this three-colored haki in the process of fighting me? The moment this thought appeared, Garp was instantly terrified and broke out in a cold sweat. Because in the process of the fight just now, Garp already knew that the two swordsmen in front of him were not as weak as he had imagined, but were two very powerful experts. I am afraid that even Hawkeye could not compare to either of the two in front of him. During the battle just now, Garp went from testing at the beginning to almost full-strength attacks later on, with armament haki and observation haki being used by Garp to the limit. But he was never able to cause any harm to the swordsman in front of him. The most bizarre thing was that the person in front of him seemed to have not yet gone all out, because no matter how much strength he added, the opponent could easily catch it. It was as if he had no surprise or perception regarding the changes in his power. Now, every punch he threw was at least 10 times stronger than when he first started fighting Yasuo. Yet Yasuo was still blocking all his attacks sword by sword, unhurriedly, and hadn't even changed his position much. Most importantly, in the process of fighting him, Yasuo had not used his devil fruit ability that could turn into blue-white wind from beginning to end. Before the white light appeared just now, Garp was actually already very nervous and uneasy. Because in Garp's perception, the swordsmanship of the person in front of him seemed to be getting smoother and smoother, as if he had been using him to practice sword moves. Seeing the three-colored haki now appear on Yasuo, Garp's unease was magnified to the extreme. He had encountered this feeling of powerlessness before, and it was also on someone from the Otherworld pirate crew. That was the first time he faced Saitama. His all-out attack, in front of the opponent, was like a child playing, whereas this swordsman he was fighting this time didn't have that feeling of toying with him, but was utilizing him to learn something. However, this swordsman, as well as Saitama from last time, both made Garp feel despair. Garp shook his arms. Looking at Yasuo in front of him, he laughed heartily. While Garp was laughing loudly, a powerful Conqueror's haki was also released from Garp's body. Ha ha ha, the young people on the sea now are truly remarkable. Next, I'm going to go all out, so don't look down on an old man too much. Fist bone, meteor. As black and red lightning swirled around his fist, Garp began to unleash his most proficient and sure-to-win finishing move against Yasuo in front of him. Consecutive haki infusion fist bone heavy punches. And Yasuo's unsheathed blade was quickly enveloped by black armament haki, clashing sword by sword with Garp's heavy punches. While the two were fighting, Yon, on the side, looked at his brother, and a similarly invisible aura radiated from Yon's body. Compared to Yasuo's vicissitudes and arrogance, Yon's aura was more inclined toward the interweaving of light and evil. It was an aura even more bizarre and powerful than the Conqueror's haki radiated by Yasuo. And the several vice admirals following Garp were watching all of this helplessly, completely afraid to make any move. Because they could clearly perceive how terrifying the man holding the dual swords in front of them was, it was a terror that was completely on a different level from themselves. The few vice admirals looked at Garp, who was currently fighting Yasuo with all his might. They gave a wink to the soldiers filling the ship behind them. They began doing what Garp had instructed them to do from the very beginning of this battle. What is this thing? What terrifying power! Originally, Akainu and Akiji, along with the fleet under their command, were rushing at full speed toward a small island not far from here. For a devil fruit user, fighting at sea, especially against a physical combat expert like Saitama, could lead to a disadvantage if one was not careful. Only by going to land to fight could they truly unleash their full strength. But the ship had only just traveled a short distance when a white light that pierced through the entire heaven, earth, and ocean directly left Akainu and Akiji stunned in place. This level of attack had already exceeded the scope of their imagination. If this white light changed direction, Akainu felt that the entire red line might even be split in two. This power was truly too exaggerated. Akainu felt that even Pluton, one of the three legendary ancient weapons, would not be able to achieve this level. Moreover, the source of this white light's eruption was in the very center of the battlefield they had just left not long ago. At the location of the captain of the Otherworld pirate crew. Could this attack have been unleashed by the captain of the Otherworld pirate crew? After this thought appeared in his mind, Akainu immediately shook his head, denying this terrifying thought of his. Such an attack was clearly not something a human could cause. Now, Akainu clearly knew that in the center of the battlefield, in the area where the two Gorosei were fighting, some incredible change must have occurred. Moreover, looking at the two bald heads beside him, the expressions on their faces did not have any confusion, only excitement. At this moment, Akainu and Akiji tacitly exchanged a glance, both seeing what the other's eyes wanted to express. It's over. Since Saitama and the other bald man in front of them were not in the slightest bit shocked by this white light, and didn't even have any intention of going back to check, then it proved that this white light was most likely a commotion created by the Otherworld pirate crew. Now it was impossible for the two of them to return to defend. Even if they went back now, it was probably already too late. Alright, stop looking. Full speed ahead towards the target. Akiji shouted sternly, bringing the Marines on the warship who were shocked by the white light back to their senses, and then the fleet of warships began to sail towards that small island at a faster speed. Akainu and Akiji on the ship looked solemn, watching the two bald men who were still unconcerned and seemed to be excitedly discussing whether the attack just now was unleashed by Captain Luluin or Pluton, and the two exchanged another tacit glance. The one just now, it should have been done by Pluton, right? Why do I feel like it was the captain? Aren't Pluton's attacks always black? Saitama and Bald Chang, surrounded by Marines, seemed to feel nothing, arguing like children. Without transforming into Ji Chang, Bald Chang's personality at this time had been influenced by Saitama, changing into the original personality of Bald Chang. By the way, what exactly is that thing you're holding in your hand? Saitama asked with confusion, looking at the silver-white, cannon-like object in Bald Chang's hand. This? This is my solidification gun. It can shoot out superparticle beams, it's very powerful. Superparticle beam? Let me see. Saitama, somewhat disbelieving, took the gun from Bald Chang's hand that looked like a toy, seemingly made of inferior plastic. He casually pulled the trigger in the direction of Akainu. Akainu saw the toy-like thing pointing at him and didn't care much at first. After all, with elementalization, Akainu was already prepared at any time. But the moment he saw Saitama's finger touch the trigger, Akainu felt a chill from the inside out. Since consuming the magma fruit, Akainu had never felt such a chill before. The next second, before Akainu could react, a bright blue beam shot out instantly from the muzzle. Elementalization or whatever, there was no time at all. A circular hole appeared right next to Akiji. Only a few severed fingers and half of a lower leg of Akainu remained in place, and the next second they clattered onto the deck of the warship. Akainu was just melted away in an instant. Akiji watched this scene, his pupils suddenly contracting. Then, a roar full of despair and disbelief burst from Akiji's mouth the next second. Ah! Chapter 90, The Death of Akainu and Akiji. Akainu. Although they didn't get along well in their daily lives, he was, regardless, one of the three admirals of Marineford who had grown up alongside him. Most importantly, as a user of the Logiotype magma fruit, Akainu's combat power was on par with his own. He was likewise one of the world's top powerhouses. Yet, just now, right before his eyes, he had been killed by a single shot from that plastic-like toy firearm. The speed was so fast that Akainu hadn't even had time to elementalize, and Akiji's observation haki hadn't even been able to issue any warning. Although Bald Chang had been holding the gun from the very beginning, no one present had truly paid any attention to it. This was because the texture of the firearm was simply too poor. It looked like some cheap industrial product, appearing even worse than an ordinary firearm, completely like a toy. But now, this very toy had instantly killed Akainu, who was equal in strength to himself. And the power of that shot. After shouting, Akiji turned his head to look. That azure beam from just a moment ago had split the entire sea behind him, just like the white light from before. Countless water vapors were currently rising from the rear. That white light from before probably also came from such a weapon, but what on earth is this weapon? Akiji's mind was racing, countless shocks and doubts intertwined, pushing his spirit to the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, on the ship, Bald Chang looked at Saitama. Saitama was currently looking at the gun in his hand, clearly startled by the blow from just a moment ago. There was a dazed expression on his face, as if he hadn't expected such powerful energy to erupt from this small weapon. This solidification gun of Bald Chang's was actually his strongest weapon, second only to his chainsaw. Wow, Bald Chang, your weapon is really amazing. Watching Saitama look at him with sparkling eyes, Bald Chang revealed a rather smug smile. Having his invention recognized by a powerhouse like Saitama was simply the happiest thing for Bald Chang. After all, Bald Chang had already come to regard Saitama as his companion. Seeing Saitama's reaction couldn't help but remind Bald Chang of the happy days he spent in those mountains, and he couldn't help but reveal a happy smile. Around the two bald men, the remaining marine soldiers, as well as Akiji and the others, were all frozen in place. Everyone found what had just happened unbelievable. Akainu, one of the strongest combatants of Marineford, had just died right in front of them, silently and without any process of battle. The opponent had simply fired a shot at Akainu with that ridiculous-looking gun. Could that kind of gun really unleash such power? What Akiji hadn't expected even more was that one of the bald men spoke a sentence that completely shattered his worldview. By the way, you were shooting randomly just now and seem to have killed quite a few people. Do you want me to reverse time and resurrect them all? Reverse time? The moment he heard Bald Chang say this, Akiji's worldview was completely shattered. At this moment, countless pieces of information were interweaving in Akiji's brain. Everything happening before his eyes, every event, every sentence, every action, every scene exceeded Akiji's imagination and completely departed from the scope of what Akiji could accept. Everything that happened today made Akiji feel as if he were dreaming. Really? You can also resurrect them? Let me see how you do it. After hearing Bald Chang's words, Saitama was clearly very interested in the talk about reversing time and resurrection. Although in his previous world, Saitama could take anyone down with one punch and couldn't feel the joy of battle anymore, having seen the vast majority of moves, the plot of reversing time and bringing the dead back to life, things that only existed in movies and novels, could now actually happen before his eyes. Saitama was still very interested and couldn't wait to see it. After hearing Saitama's words, Bald Chang did not hesitate any longer and slowly closed his eyes. After Bald Chang closed his eyes, a faint golden light began to emerge around his body. Until that golden light completely enveloped Bald Chang from head to toe, turning him into an astonishing golden man, Bald Chang walked toward the place where Saitama had originally fired the gun. Then, immediately after, the golden light all over Bald Chang's body began to condense toward his hands. Then, in Bald Chang's hands, a golden chainsaw suddenly appeared. The moment the chainsaw started rotating, countless golden lights shone. Looking at the chainsaw in his hand, in Bald Chang's eyes, he seemed to be able to see the figures reflected on the chainsaw, Briar, Bramble, and everyone in the forest. Swish! As Bald Chang swung the chainsaw toward the direction of the shot just fired by the solidification gun, a golden light instantly covered the original trajectory. Then, in this golden light, it seemed as if everything had been pressed with a rewind button. All the destruction caused by that superparticle beam shot just now was gradually pulled back under this golden light, as if all damage had been smoothed away. And the figure of Akainu, who had been instantly melted, slowly recondensed at this moment. Akainu's fingers that had fallen on the ship, as well as his severed lower leg, slowly combined with his body at this moment. The next second, the superparticle beam from just now seemed as if it had never been fired at all, and everything returned to its original state. Even the evaporated water vapor behind had completely disappeared. Ah! Ha ha ha, wah, what happened? But at this moment, Akainu, standing on the spot, was completely different from before. After being resurrected, Akainu immediately supported his knees with both hands and began to pant heavily. Cold sweat poured down his whole body, and his eyes were full of confusion as he looked at Akiji. He asked the biggest question in his heart while panting heavily. Because just a moment ago, Akainu felt as if he had died for an instant, that Azure Beam had clearly hit him. And he had no way to perform elementalization because that Azure Beam was simply too fast. After that, Akainu had no consciousness. The next instant he opened his eyes, everything seemed as if it hadn't happened, only the two bald men in front of him had swapped positions. Akiji was looking at him as if he had seen a ghost. What a joke! What a joke! I know, everything now is an illusion, all of this must be fake. Ice Age. At this moment, Akiji only felt that everything happening before his eyes was fake and just wanted to break this illusion he was currently in. With Akiji's sharp shout, endless bone-chilling cold began to spread from around Akiji. The bone-chilling cold had instantly frozen the entire warship. Meanwhile, Bald Chang and Saitama were still standing in place. This cold, which could instantly kill Marine Vice Admiral level personnel, seemed not to be perceived by Bald Chang and Saitama at all, as they let the cold spread toward them. The two of them just stood there. As the endless cold invaded, Saitama twisted his neck, while Bald Chang slowly took his gun back from Saitama's hand. With a flip of his hand, the gun disappeared. Looking at Akiji, who was attacking him with all his might, Saitama tisked in displeasure. Hey! You two, I'm not a monster either. We are clearly all heroes, so why do you want to kill each other? Why are you attacking me? After coming to this warship, Saitama actually had no intention of killing the two of them. Because Saitama could clearly sense that the two people in front of him were not monsters, and even from his perception, these two people could be considered heroes. The reason he had followed them was because these two people said they could spar with him, that they could fight freely. But judging from the attack intensity he currently felt on his body, these two heroes didn't seem to have any intention of sparring with him. It looked like they were attacking him with all their might, but he only felt his skin a little cooler at the moment. Suddenly, Saitama felt extremely bored, not even as interesting as playing with Bald Chang. Meteor Volcano. Just as Saitama's voice had not yet fallen, Akainu shouted again from over there. It was Akainu who attacked. Although he didn't know what had happened just now, Akainu clearly knew that this time he and Akiji had to attack. Although he didn't know what that Azure Beam was, it was obvious that it shouldn't have much power, otherwise, he wouldn't be standing here unscathed. Since that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. Now the situation on the battlefield of the two Gorosei was unclear. It was very likely that the battle was already unfavorable. Vice Admiral Garp should be killing those two swordsmen of the Otherworld pirate crew with unstoppable force and then rushing to support the two Gorosei. The progress here must also be accelerated, even if there was no way to directly kill these two bald men, at least they had to be stalled. At the same time as Akiji's endless cold attacked, the magma meteors summoned by Akainu also fell from the sky, beginning to smash toward the direction where Bald Chang and Saitama were. Looking at this scene, Bald Chang looked at Saitama, and both of them were somewhat amused. This time, how about you leave it to me? Bald Chang asked Saitama. Looking at Bald Chang, Saitama did not intend to make a move, just nodded silently. And the moment Saitama nodded, the aura around Bald Chang's whole body changed instantly, and even the clothes on his body changed. In coarse hemp clothing, with a long sword, Bald Chang had instantly transformed into the appearance of Jiqian. There was no terrifying momentum. There was no heaven-defying phenomenon. It was just a vicissitudinous swordsman who had suddenly appeared beside Saitama. Drawing my sword for you is my respect for you, and not showing you my chainsaw is my mercy for you. A cold gleam flashed by. Even Saitama only barely saw the moment Jiqian drew his sword. At the same time as this cold gleam appeared, the whole world and the whole ocean seemed to have become calm. Akainu and Akiji, who had been clamoring to attack just a moment ago, now seemed as if they had been pressed with a pause button. The eyes of the two people still maintained their previous state, and their actions still maintained their previous state, including the officers and soldiers around them as well. Everyone had not had time to make any reaction. Even the meteors in the sky and the cold that was flying over were the same. Whether it was them themselves, or their attacks, it seemed that they had not noticed that Jiqian had already drawn his sword. And the moment Jiqian drew his sword, the battle was already over. Saitama, looking at Jiqian's current state, had sparkling eyes. It was clear that Saitama really wanted to fight Jiqian, because now Saitama could clearly sense that the person in front of him was absolutely a qualified opponent to spar with. However, his captain indeed had a strict order not to spar with crew members. Saitama could only shake his head helplessly and reached out to put his hand on Jiqian's shoulder. Forget it, let's go see Yon and the others. Okay. Then the figures of the two disappeared from this warship. After the two left, starting from the place where they stood, the warship seemed to begin to disintegrate by itself in the void. If one could look at it magnified 1 billion times, one could see all the constituent elements of the warship being completely shredded and severed at this moment. Everything had completely turned into nothingness. And starting from the deck where the two were standing, this nothingness instantly swallowed everything around, including Akainu and Akiji. Even the sweeping cold and the falling meteors from the sky. All existence was cut into nothingness. Two of the strongest combatants of Marineford, one of the 3 admirals, thus ended their lives on this ship, without anyone knowing what had happened. The figures of Saitama and Bald Chang appeared on the Doghead battleship next to Yon the next moment. On the Doghead battleship at this moment, Garp's whole body was densely covered with various scars, many wounds on his arms were already deep enough to see the bone, and bloodstains covered his entire body. But even so, Garp stood firmly on the spot, not kneeling on the ground. His eyes were staring fixedly at Yasuo. After seeing the figures of Saitama and Bald Chang appear on the ship instantly, Garp was dazed for a moment, and then smiled relievedly. At this moment, Garp seemed to have guessed what had happened. However, now he had no other feelings except powerlessness. Even if he knew what had happened, he couldn't do anything. Because this high ponytail swordsman in front of him made Garp realize, otherworld pirate crew. They were probably all terrifying monsters. That's it for today, thanks for watching.